Hello and welcome to Kingdom of Context. I'm Sean. I want to thank you for joining me here tonight. We're going to have a wonderful interview with Mark Sargent of his self-titled channel, Mark Sargent, and on YouTube. And we're excited to get into that. But before we do, I just want to say a big shout out and thank you to the moderators that are here tonight. Thank you so much. We don't know what to expect from the live chat tonight, and what type of fun conversation that this interview tonight will bring. So, just moderators, as always, we want to lovingly encourage you. Please do not permanently ban anyone, but just put them on a timeout or put them on a mute if you have to. If they get out of hand, not just if they're disagreeing with what we think and talk about on this channel. It's okay if they disagree, but if they get contentious, if they start name calling, accusing people, if they start, acting a fool, basically, then you can put them on a mute. But hopefully their heart will change. And if they're not permabanned, then they'll come back next time and act better. So thank you so much, moderators, for abiding by that general principle and standard. And everyone else that's here watching, both on Lighthouse and on YouTube. Big shout out to everyone that's here. We've already got a whole crew of people in the live chat on Lighthouse as well. So you guys are awesome. And Miss Marsha, Miss Leonard's over there. And as a quick reminder, tomorrow is the day that I'm doing the giveaway. So tomorrow, I'm actually going to be doing the selection, the drawing, if you will, for the $500 Home Depot gift card for Father's Day. So how you enter that is if you join our channel on Lighthouse, or if you drop a light sticker on Lighthouse. That's all those people, because Lighthouse actually knows from your profile. It shows me who you are that dropped the light sticker and joined. YouTube doesn't do that. So that's why we're encouraging folks to switch over there, and your support goes much further over there. They don't take 30% like Lighthouse. Excuse me, like YouTube. Lighthouse doesn't take 30%. So your help and your support goes much further. So we appreciate you guys. So tomorrow, all the people that have been joining and supporting us over there, or dropping a light sticker for support, we'll do the drawing for the gift card. So you guys, we're super appreciated. Super appreciated. Thank you so much. All right. So without further ado, I would like to bring on to the program Flat Earth advocate and recruiter, Mark Sargent.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
So I've watched you for years. I think I remember I watched a Rob Skiba video. I was in the gym. It was 2015.
Yep.
I watched a Rob Skiba video.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that the word firmament might have a definition to it. And so that was before all the censorship on YouTube. So I immediately went to the YouTube search bar. Well, after I finished laughing at the thought.
Of course.
And then about an hour later, I came to my senses and said, well, wait a minute, words do have definitions.
Right.
And so then I went to YouTube search bar. I typed in FLATEATRTH, and then these wonderful videos of clues popped up. And I think I watched the second one first, and then I had to go back and watch them all in sequential order.
Yeah.
So would you like to, you are the author of the Flat Earth Clues,
Yep.
Mark Sargent, and I would just like, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. And would you like to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
Going?
It's been an amazing ride so far. My name is Mark Sargent. I got into Flat Earth. I started looking at it in 2014, made my very first video ever in 2015, the beginning of 2015, put it out there as a cry for help because I couldn't prove the globe in a court of law anymore. And waited for the other shoe to drop, waited for academics to come on, hit me with a ton of bricks, and they never did. And I mean, this thing just kept steamrolling and expanding and expanding. And now here we are 9 years later, where, 3 books, a couple documentaries, a third one, if the French one ever comes out, apparently he's going to get a link for that pretty soon. I lost count on how many interviews, even though David Weiss has done probably triple the amount I have. And it's been an amazing ride so far. But yeah, I am the Flat Earth recruiter. Let me start with that, which is, if you're into Flat Earth, chances are a lot of what you learned links back to what I created in the beginning of 2015. The only people that did stuff before me in any amount would have been Eric DeBay out of Thailand, and Matt Boyland out of Canada. Originally, he's from Montreal, Canada. I have no idea where he is now. So there you go.
Yeah, he probably wanted to just not be harassed anymore. So he probably got out the game.
Who,
But
Matt Boylan?
yeah, Matt Boylan. Yeah,
You never know. You never know with Matt. He was an interesting guy to watch, though. Every producer, I have so many producers. Did you ever see Behind the Curve, the Netflix
I
documentary?
did. Yeah.
There was very little fiction in that. Meaning Matt Boylan was really that aloof artist type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Producers like, oh, how do we get a hold of Matt Boylan? Can you get a hold of him? Like, no, he doesn't want to talk to media. And
Tell
so
him we're filming in an empty warehouse with one wooden chair,
right.
and he'll
Right.
show up.
If a flat earther was our version of Andy Warhol.
I was about to say, yeah,
Basically, he was that guy. And so by the time the ironic thing was, by the time he got into it, when he says, okay, I'll talk to media now. One, the media didn't even want to talk to him because we were already out of the gate. And the other part was, who knew he couldn't do an interview to save his life. He, for whatever reason, that part where he's constantly looking over his shoulder, swearing that, the government's looking and listening to everything, which they do. But we thought that paranoid thing was just an act. It's not an act. He cut off interviews because he swore there was CIA viruses, jumping around his computer. But anyway.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of folks that have tried to start talking about this topic, and they started seeing the pushback, the censorship, and then they decided not to talk about it anymore, right? And so there's to respect to them and their family and what choices they've made. Sure. We actually feel like there's an easy workaround from our perspective, because I'm a Christian. I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I believe there is a Creator, the Almighty, and so when I read the Bible and I see, he actually described an enclosed system, then I just started talking about biblical cosmology from that point forward.
Right.
Instead of the extremely condemned two words of flat and earth.
Right. And if it wasn't for the late Rob Skiba, I wouldn't have even known what biblical cosmology, that was really a term to latch onto. He was the guy, I turned him back in 2015. Wow, it makes it sound like I'm a vampire. But I did. I turned him onto Flat Earth in 2015. You know the story very well. Where he got on a Canary Cry radio and listened to the thing that I was doing with him, and he was one of the first people to reach out to me, and we were friends all the way to the end. Where he said, "Yeah, it's a Flat Earth book." He goes, "He's absolutely Flat Earth." And he goes, not only that, he dedicated the website, which is still out there, testingtheglobe.com, which is absolutely phenomenal. Anyone that's into biblical cosmology or doesn't believe that the Bible is a flat earth book, go to testingtheglobe.com. But then he followed up and saying, oh yeah, Zen Garcia, that's changed his life. Zen Garcia, who went to some of our conferences, and Zen's big thing was the Book of Enoch. And because he was trying to figure out stuff with the Book of Enoch. It's, as you know, the Book of Enoch is not the easiest read in the world for the novice, right?
Yeah, I've actually wrote a commentary on it.
Yep, I saw that.
yeah, I hear you.
and Zen called up Rob right away and said, yeah, he goes, this answers so many questions that I had. This fills in so many gaps. And for him, that's when Zen started writing furiously about the Book of Enoch again, because again, unless you look at it from a flat earth or biblical cosmology perspective, the Book of Enoch there's things that don't make sense, but once you get into our mindset, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, especially if it's a firmament enclosed model, then the Book of Enoch makes sense, because in chapter 72 it talks about the way that Enoch was being shown the creation in different parts of the creation, and it says that there was 12 portals, 3 on each, I guess, if I could just use this term, 3 at each cardinal direction on the exterior of the firmament. And those actually are like huge gates that are open to let in certain winds to create weather patterns. Yeah. And the average person doesn't realize that all weather prediction patterns come from Antarctica.
Ooh. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we did a thing. I actually, me and another buddy, Wes Blaze, we do a show called Uncommon Ground, and it's all about cosmology. And in our first season, we did, I think it was episode 4, we did a show in Antarctica. And I showcase a documentary about a Russian weather station in Antarctica, and they're talking about it, how the average person doesn't realize that all weather predictions come from Antarctica. That's where everything's. They're putting up daily. They put up weather balloons daily. And
I knew that part.
special grease they put on them because of the low air pressure and everything, and so they put them up daily in order to test the weather, and then that becomes the weather patterns that gets reported back to all the major outlets.
Nice.
So that makes perfect sense with what the Book of Enoch claims.
Yeah.
Is
And
that
and and again, the average person, when you look at the Book of Enoch, like you were just talking about, where they talk about physical portals and mechanical devices and mechanisms that
yeah
are up there, and the average person's like, well, yeah, but it can't be actual mechanicals because that makes the world, seem like it's like a giant building, a giant, structure. And then when you start getting into our stuff, you're like, oh, hey, it
yeah
does kind of sound like that, doesn't it? It's
yeah
kind of like backstage. When you're behind, if you've done any stage production, when you go back behind like a live stage play, it's all gears and pulleys and ropes and all this stuff. When I got into this and got into the Book of Enoch, I'm going, Enoch is the behind the scenes. It's behind the curtain. That's
mhm.
all it is, and which is why I'm sure it wasn't canonized.
Well,
Because-
that's the crazy history about that particular book is that the first century, so it was considered sacred scripture until the first century AD, and there was a specific rabbi of Judaism, and I say that specifically because there's a difference between just Jews of the first century versus there became a split, if I could put it like this, between people in Judea that started believing Jesus Christ versus those who wanted to not believe in Jesus Christ and then were a part of stayed with traditional Judaism at the time.
right,
And so the rabbis, the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the religious controlling class, they didn't like people believing in Christ, so they were kicking them out of the synagogues, which is where the scriptures were read. And then towards the latter, 75% way into the first century AD, specifically a rabbi named Rabbi Akiva, he had the most authority, and he's the one that decided we're going to remove some books from what we consider sacred scriptures and discourage people from reading them. And one of those was the Book of Enoch,
there you go. Yeah.
because it prophesies the first and second coming of the Messiah.
Yeah.
And it was fulfilling all these prophecies, and they didn't want people believing in them.
Yeah.
And just like today, just like corrupt religious leaders today, they threaten people's salvation, like as if they have the power to do that anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Or hang on to one verse like it has veto power. And for
Right.
those out there in your audience, and I'm sure there are many of them that say, oh, the Bible's got to mention, that it's a sphere, a globe, or a ball. It's like, no, it mentions Isaiah 40:22, one verse, that he who sitteth upon the circle of the earth.
That's
And
right.
as you know, the circle is not the same word as ball or globe or sphere, especially in Hebrew. All right. And I have talked to pastors that hold on to it with their fingernails, that verse, like it has veto power over, I don't know, Genesis, when it talks about the firmament. And I know one verse isn't supposed to hold sway over the other, but it's like, but the reason they're holding on to it is fear. The fear of going to your congregation and saying, oh, hey, by the way, we're gonna roll this back a bit and we're gonna go with the old school thing. And again, if anyone's in doubt, you can Google, and I won't pull it up on screen, but you know what it is. I mean, you go into not biblical cosmology, but type in, well, you could type in that too, but type in ancient cosmology
Mhm.
and click on images in any
Yep.
search engine and see what happens. Everybody drew the same thing. They drew some sort of snow globe building structure.
Yep. With
Uh,
multiple layers.
with multiple
And
layers, and the biblical cosmology thing varies only in that there's the substrata, the lower
yeah.
areas. That's
Yeah, we found quotes from first century and second century quote unquote early church fathers that are talking about the firmament, and they say, yeah, it has 7 layers or 7 levels of firmament. At the top is the Creator, the Almighty, and then we're down here on what was considered the last layer, encompassed by the last firmament that was created on day 2 of Genesis. Sure. And so that's where I interview pastors on my channel and try to bring this up to them, and they just start knee jerking like crazy, right? Because it's hard for them to admit that their congregants might kick them out of the church.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the congregation, peer pressure, it doesn't matter where you go. Peer pressure is still the same. Doesn't matter how you slice it and how you label it. And the congregation is huge amounts of peer pressure, especially if you're that guy on stage and it's usually just you. I mean, occasionally you got some backup singers and backup speakers and stuff like that, but you don't want to, turn against them or, that fear of the mob, them all of a sudden, you feel that wave, anybody who's on stage in any capacity will tell you it's the same thing. And pastors are not immune to it by any stretch.
Yeah, they're not, especially because many of them are ordained by their association. So if they're like in a Lutheran, Presbyterian, Baptist,
Yeah.
and if that elder council decides that you're preaching something against their orthodoxy,
Yeah.
that you lost your job.
Yeah.
They'll kick you out. So there's
Yeah.
peer pressure both from the community as well as from their families, to keep their job and their income.
Yeah.
And so for the few pastors that have come on, if you're watching this right now and you've seen that that I have, you did openly talk about this with me. You didn't laugh at it and mock it.
Yeah.
And some of you even have realized it's the truth now and are actually declaring it. Big kudos to you, because I know the risk you're taking with your personal lives.
Yep.
So big kudos to you guys.
Yep.
Mark, tell us a little bit about, before we go into like really modern events, as far as like how the culture is reacting to this topic and everything. Would you mind sharing with my audience a little bit kind of about where you came from, where you grew up, and what got you here?
I was born on a rural island up in the northwest of the country, north of Seattle, just just south of the San Juans, called Whidbey, Whidbey, a type of place where it was tough to get in trouble, meaning short of throwing rocks at cop cars, it was tough to get in trouble. So I was very innocent, very sheltered, very naive. I only thought there was one religion. I was raised born again Christian. Went to Christian Missionary and Alliance Church, that was CMA, out of Langley, Washington, and that was during the '80s. I'm a little bit older, so that was one of those heyday decades for Christianity, where it was kind of a cool thing. We had church wasn't just a Sunday thing. We had youth group. We had Saturday things. I went to vacation Bible school, summer camps. I went to Camp Malibu up in Canada. If you've ever heard of that, that was a really fun Christian camp. And didn't, just kind of follow the rules. I didn't think there was a conspiracy. I didn't know what the word conspiracy was until I got off the island, went to college, and I remember my very first conspiracy, and I know we have to be careful about what we talk about in some places. But I watched the Oliver Stone movie JFK, and in the early '90s in the theater, because there was no internet, and I was like, wow, packed house. Everyone that came out of that, I remember, was visibly upset, because that was his masterpiece. He interspliced everything so well that people were all in on this thing.
Was it 3 hours long?
Yeah, it was over 3 hours long, and all-star cast. Heck, I think the actors did it for free, because most actors, they love they love the idea of JFK. JFK was no saint,
right,
by any stretch, but as far as presidents go, he was one of the most popular presidents of all time. Not legendary like Lincoln or Washington or Jefferson, those guys, but modern day presidents, he was way up there.
Well, he vowed to do this thing and the other.
Yes,
that always cracks me up about that speech. We vow to go to the moon and to do this thing and the other,
and do the other thing. Not because
it
is easy, but because it's hard. In that thick Boston accent he had, Massachusetts accent.
Yeah.
But anyway, so but yeah, my I have one sister. Standard. Really, I don't know. As far as growing up, sorry, really quick. High school, I was kind of a clique jumper, meaning I was athletic, but I was pretty smart. But I also was eccentric. So, and I'm not going to go into the fireworks thing. You know that one. Anyone wants to check? There's videos on that.
Long story short, Mark almost got in trouble with the feds because he started making his own fireworks. That's
almost got in trouble. No.
Well, I mean, you're not still in jail, so
no. I never did time, and that's because the laws. You guys probably don't know this, but illegal fireworks, cherry bombs and that sort of thing, they were legal all the way up until Kennedy's era. And then part of the Child Protection Act, and I agree with it, for various reasons. You don't want kids blowing their fingers off. Yeah. So they made it illegal. Well, unfortunately for me, I came along 20 years later, and the Native American reservations still were selling them because they're exempt from a lot of things, but they still had to sell it underneath the table, and they're looking for suppliers. And so I was pretty good at chemistry, and I used to make it for them, and I got in trouble.
So on a much smaller scale, me and some neighbors in the neighborhood, when I was like 12 or 13, we got, a whole bunch of packs of Black Cats and just meticulously got the gunpowder out of them, and then tried to make our own larger incendiary device.
By
By
the way, just so you guys know, it's not, I mean, yes, you can use gunpowder if you want, but the stuff that's in firecrackers is actually just flash powder. And if you're wondering what flash powder is, it's literally what you think, which is, it is we've seen it in movies and television, you know, going back years, which was to take flash photography back in the day, you needed a really, really, really fast burning powder. So you filled up a tray with this powder. You hopefully didn't use too much, and you the poof, right? And you know, the running gag where if you use too much, everyone got black-faced or, you know, burned up, and it was awful. So if you confined it, though, it burned so fast that it would burst any container that was in. And that is the definition of firecrackers. It's not like Centex or C4 or anything like that with a really, really fast feet per second. But it's very, you know, still very loud. It's fireworks, right? It's showtime. It's stuff they use flash powder in stage productions all day long. Anyway, I got in trouble for it, changed my life, which was, you know, I got in trouble for it just as I was turning 21. Personally, I think they just waited until I turned 21 so they could throw the book at me. And then part of my community service was to teach kids. I was a computer aide at a middle school, because I knew, I grew up in a teacher's lounge. I had tons of teachers in my family. I'm probably one of the few people ever that did his community service at a school, right? That wasn't janitorial work. And in my spare time, I played a lot of video games, played computer pinball, won a computer pinball tournament. The company that was in Boulder, Colorado, that published it hired me to be a ringer. And so I went out to Boulder, Colorado, and I lived there for 20 years. From 95 until 2015, almost to the day. I think it was just a little over 20 years. And during that time, I never got married or had kids, so I had a lot of free time on my hands. So I went down just about every internet rabbit hole you could think of when the internet was new, right? When you could finish the freaking internet. And so I was eased into it, you know, everything from 9/11 to Bigfoot to Loch Ness Monster to the moon landing and so on and so on. All the big major conspiracies, Pearl Harbor. And then all the smaller conspiracies, you know, any tragic mass incidents that happened in various places. And that's when I looked into, you know, I wasn't getting any younger. So when I was in my mid 40s, I decided, you know what, flat Earth, why not, right? Kind of like what we were doing during the pandemic, kind of like now. I've watched just about everything on Netflix. I never said I was. In fact, I'm only on season 3 of The Blacklist. Never watched The Blacklist. I'm now watching the freaking Blacklist.
Have you seen Dark?
The what?
Dark.
Is that German one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
But again, the fact that I'm watching stuff that's dubbed or subtitled is amazing. Right. So when I looked at flat Earth, thought for sure, because, you know, I have an opinion now, again, because I had so much time on my hands. I have an opinion on just about every conspiracy there is. You can ask me anything you want. I like some, I don't like others. Was JFK shot by a lone gunman that was then in turn shot by a lone gunman? Probably not. That's lightning striking lightning. Highly unlikely, right? Do I think that Elvis is alive and is having a relationship with Bigfoot? No, probably not.
No.
But and so flat Earth, which was kind of in between those two, I was like, okay, I'll look at this thing, and I hated it. It's like there's no way. I mean, flat Earth is too. Again, it's the only thing we debunk to children, which should say something. And I looked at it over a weekend, thought I could knock it out in a weekend. Nope, turned into a week, turned into months, turned into 9 months, and that's when I decided I was gonna, you know, make a series of videos, because the internet as a hive mind is very, very intelligent. People, individuals, not so much. But as a hive mind, everybody has a little piece of the information that something's missed. And I said, okay, tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I screwed this up. Nobody ever did. In fact, the academics never ever called me. In fact, it was subject matter experts, all the people from military and air traffic controllers and pilots, everybody except for aerospace, for a good reason, contacted me and said, yeah, it's not that nuts. Here's why. And they would give me these little things. I was like, what? You mean I'm right? Are you serious? For the first 6 months, I honestly thought that I was going to get shut down and I could get back to playing video games. Nope. That you would
eventually interview somebody that actually gave you the missing puzzle piece and debunk the whole idea. but that never
Yeah.
happened.
Somebody, some guy with a master's in astrophysics or astronomy that would say, okay, you forgot to carry the two. That
Mhm.
proves this proves that. You can shut down your YouTube channel and go away. And it never happened. And then I started coming out with these challenges saying, okay, you want to prove to me that's a globe, you're gonna have to do, one of two things. And I'd throw out these challenges. Easy. Wouldn't cost them really that much money. No one would even entertain the idea.
Mhm.
And to where now is like, I mean, are there some plot holes in flat Earth? Yes, absolutely. But there are so many more inconsistencies with the globe, so many more, that people generally go for the easier option, which is,
Well, there's
okay, flat Earth makes more sense.
not to focus any the majority of the conversation on the specific writing of the Book of Enoch, but I think
Sure.
it's interesting because the Book of Enoch will have like everything that's in here is, you can also, well, not everything, but all the themes, all the major theological descriptions of the creation, as well as how it's used in the storyline, you can still find in the rest of the scriptures as well.
Yeah.
But this one specifically, there's a chapter, I think it's chapter 39 or 40. It talks about Enoch's being taken to the end of the firmament, the end of the heavens,
Right.
to where he sees these, what he calls like large machines. And I want to call them world engines, but I think I'm stealing that from the Superman movie from 2012. But
Steal it. Take it.
there's something like, I can't remember the exact phrase he uses, and it depends on the translation as well. But basically, he sees some sort of apparatus that's a large. It doesn't get any description to it. It's just at the end of the heavens, at the end of the firmament, and you're like, I'm just wondering, is it literally possibly what's creating weather?
Yeah, and what strikes you, the more you look at it, what you were just saying there, is that everything he's describing is finite. There's the big difference here. Whereas God has always been this ethereal thing, and everything just wispy, comes out of nowhere with lightning and thunder and stuff like that. The stuff that he was describing might as well been inside a giant automobile factory,
Right.
where
Yeah.
there was all sorts of mechanisms. He couldn't even begin to fathom what they did. But again, because he saw a beginning and an end to them, kind of like he was saying, like the end of the end of the world, the end of the firmament, he was describing the borders of how this stuff, where the winds come from, where the snow and the rain comes from. It's like, what are you talking about? It doesn't come from anywhere. Oh yeah, it does. It comes from that thing right there. I saw it. And it's not like he was there for a short amount of time either, right?
Yeah, that's one of the chronological concepts that a lot of churches miss because this book is not in the modern American canon.
Yeah.
It was in the Ethiopian canon this whole time for
Right.
2,000 years,
Right.
well as other canons. But most Americans, because they don't have that information, and as well as the Book of Jubilees, which tells you about Enoch's journey and back into the Garden of Eden, where he was protected for 300 years, they just go off Genesis 5:23 and Hebrews 11:5, and as a result of that, they think that he only lived 365 years. But when you put all the Israelite literature together, you realize actually he lived 665 years, and he would have overlapped with Noah's lifespan, which makes sense, because in the writings of Enoch, at the end, Noah has a vision of the flood that's coming, and he runs to the edge of the garden to talk to great granddaddy Enoch and ask him, what is this vision I had? What's going on? I saw a piece of the heaven falling off and water pouring in. You know what I mean? So like all those details matter. It's the description of it is not Gnostic. It's not ethereal. It's not non-tangible. Yeah. All of it is that the creator lives at the top of a large structure. You were created with intentionality and purpose. Yeah. He has this entire army of other beings that he created called angels that are messengers to help mankind on the earth with different things. Sure. And the average person, and even, in one of the ancient Israelite writings, it talks about the average person doesn't even realize all this stuff is going on in heaven above them. Yeah. And so they run into destruction in their lives instead of doing what's right. And it's very interesting to see this perspective of this particular conversation gets so much pushback, because if the average person knew that it's a big Truman Show, they would change their behavior.
They would. And again, everything for a reason. God doesn't make mistakes. And kind of like why you had to turn this place into, create the illusion of the globe to begin with, which was creating the illusion kept people from even considering looking for it. People are huge fiends for mystery, right? Human beings love a mystery, which is why in all our media, we're drawn to it, which is I mean, think of the timing. You know, we had wooden ships, wooden horses. We had wooden ships and we had horses.
They had a wooden horse.
Well, yeah, we had that too. Whole nother story. We had ships and we had horses, and then we had, you know, steam engines, stuff like that. But when the globe was rolled out, it was rolled out early enough, the whole concept, that by the time, again, we didn't, until the internal combustion engine, which wasn't that long ago, we really didn't have the ability to travel any great distances, you know, at speed.
What if I told you that actually is not
Well,
accurate?
okay. In our, it's a
How about this?
whole other thing.
The average person was not allowed to travel great
Right.
distances or communicate at great distances.
Right. The general public.
Yeah.
Once that happened, it slowed. I'm going to be jumping around here a little bit. I'm a big believer that.
Real quick, Mark, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Try
Yeah.
doing this with your camera. Put your thumb in front of it.
Oh, was that a focus for a second?
Yeah. Trying to get to reset.
Just stay focused, and all I do is I can reset it like that.
It's still got you blurred up for some reason. I don't know.
How about now? Better?
It's all good. We can roll with it.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm 164th vampire on my mother's side, so cameras and mirrors do not love me for whatever reason. I'm not kidding. But let me mention this really fast, which is because most people are going to be listening to it anyway. Don't stare at me. I'm not camera ready most of the time. I'm better live, which is weird. People said that. It's like, you don't look like you do on camera. I know, right? Which is, I believe that every civilization has a certain amount of time here, and I think that God, over the millennia, you know, in making adjustments, because again, we're not the first people to rent this apartment by a long stretch, slowed everything down as much as possible. Again, I'm not trying to say I'm in the mind of God, but I think that God enjoys a longer game, you know, a longer set, which is why the Tower of Babel was such a short story, right? Which is, again, the first civilization, at least in our Bible, was a perfect civilization that had amazing technology, were totally united, had one language, and they figured out what this place was immediately, right? And it's like, oh yeah. And what did they do? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. They rebelled against God and wanted to build a tower to get through the firmament.
Well, yeah, because they could get there. And again, if it's on a globe, that building, you know, that structure that's going to reach to heaven, what's that on a globe? That's just a needle on an apple going around like this. That goes nowhere. In a stationary thing, it's just going straight up, and they were going to make it. And again, this very, very short story. I'm really surprised they never expanded it into a movie, which was, you know, you know how it goes. God looks down. He's like, yeah, they're going to make it. Okay, here's what we're going to do, right? And, you know, language, scatter, and the tower, you know, gets reduced to whatever it is, you know, no remnant.
Which is actually a phenomenon that modern scientists and etymologists cannot explain. They cannot explain why approximately 4,000 years ago, languages exploded amongst different regions of the world. Yep. There was no slow progression. It was just suddenly everyone's speaking different languages and writing different hieroglyphs. So that there's only one religion on the earth that even gives offers an explanation, and that's Genesis 11 and the God of the Bible. So it's very interesting. Because the ultimate goal, because the book of Genesis talks about it, the book of Jubilees talks about it. Enoch does not talk about it because he was pre-flood. But supposedly, if you do the math, Tower of Babel, we're talking like 200-300 years after the flood. So Noah, according to the Bible, is still alive. And so this is what the historian Josephus claims around the 2nd century AD, is he claims that Nimrod was the one who rose to power and was the leader of the United Peoples, specifically because Noah was like the grand poobah. He's like, you know, 900 something years old at this point. Right. And he made it from both sides of the flood, and he was warning them not to rebel against God.
Sure. Why wouldn't
he's like, I just made it through this flood, guys. And so apparently Nimrod's like emotional tactic on the people, according to the historian, was that he caused them to think that it was courageous to rebel against God because God was a big meanie for flooding all the wicked people before the flood, right? So all the people that were raping, pillaging, and murdering and creating chimera giants and destroying the genome of mankind, all those people were, you know, should not have been judged, apparently. So this is the mindset of someone that's lost into their selfish depravity, right? Is they look at God's judgment and they say, well, oh no, he was unjust to judge those people who were killing the world and all the people in it. And so they then decided, we don't want him to flood us again. So instead of us dispersing across the earth like Noah instructed them to do, instead we're just going to all centralize and build a tower to get to him and kill him and take over his authority. And that's why it means in Genesis 11 when it talks about they wanted to create a tower to heaven so they can make a name for themselves.
Sure.
That word name in Hebrew means authority.
Yeah. Bold move. I got to tell you.
Right. So think about the crazy mind of someone like that, right? So you're thinking, oh, so Granddaddy Noah or great granddaddy Noah is telling me that this, the reason why we see all this damaged earth is because there was this massive flood, and the person who made us in this enclosure is the one who flooded us for our bad behavior. So instead of just doing what he says, which he says is the outpouring of love, I'm going to go try to take him out so I can do what I want. I mean, and of course the Satan character is a part of this. They were, according to ancient writings, the Tower of Babel, they were worshiping Jupiter, which is the Greek version of the Hebrew word for Satan, as far as Jupiter being their head pantheon god. And so that's what's another unique thing that I'm surprised. I didn't know you read the book of Enoch. I'm surprised that you mentioned it, because in the book of Enoch, it talks about the rebellious angels of heaven that came down and started taking wives and doing that and creating giants. And the only one that didn't get put in Tartarus, which is a deep hole in the ground, of the rebellious angels, was this character Azazel, whom the Hebrews knew as the Satan character. And so he's still around after the flood to pick up the shenanigans again.
Sure.
And this is the one that Nimrod endeared himself to, is the Jupiter character, the Azazel character. So that's the actual story for the Israelites, from the ancient Hebrews. And and that's how it kind of like, so if that's the case, Mark, we know from testing and observation that the description from the scriptures is where we live. Because the description from the world is contradictory to everything we can test, see, and observe. So then does that mean that the characters in the literature of the ancient Israelites is also real information? So if that's the case, then that means there is a character running around that is a rebellious angel who can't go back to heaven. He's stuck here with us until the second coming of the Son of Man. And he's trying to trick people to do a bunch of destructive things. And I'm just sitting there going like, where is he?
Right. Well, again,
did you see my presentation at Flightsoverfest a couple years ago?
Unfortunately, I usually get drug into, once I'm in the lobby, I can't.
I got you. It was when I wasn't on stage, I lost my voice because I was talking nonstop. So I understand what you feel like.
Well, to try, see if I can try to answer your question. There's something I've said on different occasions where, what the first rule of power has never really changed. And I don't care if we're talking about even the supernatural, which is the first rule is stay hidden, which is you cannot be, Napoleon said it best, which is you can't be overthrown if they don't know who you are.
That's right.
And that applies to any trickster, I would imagine, or any villain of any. I mean, yes, of course, there's some that are so bold that they'll push themselves into the spotlight, and that generally doesn't go well. But
I think because I do believe the scriptures are real. I do believe the information there is accurate. I think we can see a lot of evidence for it, both historically, anthropologically, and archaeologically. And so personally, I do believe that angels are real entities that the Creator made. And that they all have free will. So a few of them went rogue, right? And as a result, the majority of those got punished, but one's left out because he didn't do the same sins as the other majority. So he didn't get the same punishment, according to the book of Enoch. And he's still out roaming around seeking whom he may devour, as Second Peter calls him, right? The dragon, the lion that seeks to destroy people. So if that's the case, and I agree with you, I think he had his bombastic arc, if I could put it like that. I think he had his like, I'm Zeus, I'm Jupiter, I'm going to rule, and people are going to know who I am. I think he had that arc, and now he's into the I'm going to be the Shadow Man. Because it got too weird. Did you know that I actually found an 18th century BC manuscript from the ancient Egyptians? It's called the Book of the Heavenly Cow, and it talks about how Ra was living amongst mankind on the earth until they rebelled against him, and then he decided to go live in the air. This is the same story of Zeus, the same story of Baal, the same story of Ninurta, or some of
and
the other Chaldean gods.
and the original Stargate movie on top of it.
That's right.
By the way,
Yeah. By the way, yeah, that's right.
which then was turned into a very long running, one of the longest running sci-fi series of all time.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think it's the it's the usual suspects line, right? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled
Yeah,
is to make the world think he doesn't exist, and
yeah,
he is the ultimate Kaiser Soze. And with that in mind, like that means at some point, at some level of hierarchy, to the people that want to control this world, they must know that all their behavior is antithetical to the Bible.
yeah,
So that means they serve a different master.
yes,
So at
yes,
some point, you got to have a board meeting.
yeah. Oh yeah, the mythological, whatever you want to call it. I call it the authority,
Yeah.
and I'm stealing from a graphic novel series that I own. If you want to call it the Illuminati, I mean, one of the great things about power structures, especially the secret, sinister types, is that again, true power stays hidden. And if you ask the average truther community member, list me the top 10 secret societies in order of importance, right? You won't get the same 10 from all these different people, because how many are out there? The Bilderberg, the Rothschilds, the Trilateral, the Vatican Society, some sort of Jewish cabal, the Masons. It just goes on and it never ends, right? And everyone says, oh, this group's on top, this group's on top. I mean, I sit at the conferences and I listen to these arguments, usually over alcohol, where people are just going back and forth, and I go, that's what they want you to do. The line from JFK where the who is just window treatment, all these different groups. It could be any of them for me. But yes, at what you just said there, at the highest levels, yes, they know. As a matter of fact, something I had pointed out to people in one of the speeches. I don't know if it was a speech it was the conference you were at, but I was talking about how my grandfather was a 32nd degree Mason. And he would never made it to be a 33rd. And if you don't know anything about the Masons, you can buy your way up to 32, right? Because each degree, by the way, costs money. Most people don't know that. But you cannot make the jump on your own. You can't even ask. You have to be shoulder tapped. And yes, there have been 32nds that have come out and disclosed stuff, about, oh, here's the ritual, pant leg and poke in, the whole light and the Hiram Abiff stuff. But no 33rd has ever come forward, ever. And what I think is when you make it to be a 33rd, because I think they psychologically screen you. And then once you get to that point, they level with you and they say, here's the deal. You have the psychological profile. We think you're pretty much going to listen to this guy anyway. And they do. And that's it. That's the end. So yeah, do I think there's sinister meetings at the highest order? Yeah, you bet I do. Why wouldn't you? That's part of the allure, isn't it? To bring them in. If you're gonna do dark things anyway, working your way up the chain. I don't care if it's pollution or murder or trafficking or whatever it is. When you get to that highest level, you're gonna want, yes, if there's someone that you think is the epitome of all that puts you to shame, oh yeah, you're gonna follow them. You bet you're gonna. Anyway, sorry. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I can only imagine the recruiting speech is not so blatantly obvious, right? It's more of like, here's, if I could write the script, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
They bring you in and they say, hey, here's how the world works. Who's really controls the world. These industries, these are the heads of those peoples. These are the handlers above those people. Like, and here's the the Black Pope, if you will, whatever you want to call that. Right. Like here's all the people at the unseen realm. That in itself is a form of indoctrination, because now they're entrusting you, and you probably realize at that point, if they're showing me this, I can't tell anybody, otherwise I'm dead, right? Yeah. So, and my whole family, and probably my whole town, and all that kind of stuff. So, to me, it's like they would then bring you in to say, look, we're not showing you this because we're the bad guys. We're showing you this because we're trying to help humanity. We're the good guys.
Right. The line, it's been used in many a thing over the years, which is the greater good. Mm-hmm. Right. We do it for the great. And believe it or not, I understand some of the some of the lesser conspiracies. Won't go necessarily go into them, but I want to mention the three days of the Condor reference after that, which is the greater good means that when I look at conspiracies, I look at it from their standpoint. I put myself in their shoes and I go, okay, can I kind of envision what they're going for here? Meaning, do the means justify the end? right? What they're doing. You know, are you willing to sacrifice this many people to get what you want? And then, of course, they'd say, well, you know, for the benefit of civilization. But to your point, as far as not talking and why there's so very few whistleblowers, there's a great Robert Redford movie called 3 Days of the Condor back in his heyday, back in the early 70s, about CIA versus CIA crime. He worked for a CIA group, and there was it was a research group, and they got caught finding out something the another group happened, and they went to war with each other. This group got wiped out, and he was going to go to the New York Times, right? And this is the point I wanted to make. So, and the end of the movie was him yelling at his former boss, who turned out to be corrupt, and he goes, "No, I've already given it to him. I've already given it to, you know, New York." So he points to the building, right? And the New York boss is worried for a second, right? Then he looks and he goes, "How do you know they'll run it?" And he goes, "They'll run." They'll run it. And he goes, "Really? How do you know?" Right? Meaning we have people everywhere. Right. There's no way, and probably an editor.
Mockingbird.
Yeah. So there's no way you're getting through that filter. So when people yell at me and they say, "Oh, you know, an astronaut would have whistleblown by now." It's like, okay, first of all, there's only been like less than 600 people that even claim to have gone to space, right? You know, and all those people would be psychologically screened. They're all military. All their phones are tapped. Their email is tapped. Their mail is, you know, everything is tracked just in case they even inkling of going in the wrong direction, right? So don't tell me that. And even if you could, you know, I'll throw the question at you. If you had one shot, right? You know, you were going to be a whistleblower. What media source you going to?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where are you going to go to CNN? You're going to go to Fox? You're going to MSNBC? You're going to go to Newsmax? You're going to InfoWars? What group can you go to where you're absolutely 100% sure that you're going to get through and that story is going to get out there? There are so many layers of security along the way. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom there, but
no, this is the fight, right? You know, media is a big deal, so this is definitely the fight. Yeah. There's a lot that goes into this conversation as far as not just the reality of where we live and you know, because my understanding is that if people understood the reality of where they live, they'd realize they were created. They would realize that there's purpose for them. They're not on a spinning water ball that's flinging aimlessly into a solar system in some insignificant speck on an insignificant portion of the universe, and as Neil deGrasse Tyson describes it. Because the Bible, you know, the God of the Bible I read says that he does view us as important, and we do have purpose, and he made us for a reason. He wants to have fellowship with us, and that he will be for he's a gentleman. Like, he doesn't just impose to say, like, I'm going to go here and I'm going to override everybody's free will and only make a utopian society. He lets it play out because that actually is the ultimate intelligence. Otherwise, you don't know if people truly want to be with you or not.
Right. Well, oh heck, look at the line. Look at Job, for example. Right. You know, it kills me to this day because you're thinking about free will, whereas it's like he allows trolls. Job was trolling him, right? Criticizing his design. And you know, God's like, you know, the famous quote, it's like, which sounds like an old guy quote, which is like, where were you?
Right.
I built this, right? Where were you? I built this whole, you know, the line that you know, anyone senior citizens, I was doing this before you were a gleam in your daddy's eye, you know, that whole thing. That's what God was saying. But the fact that he even allowed Job to take it that far is like, really?
Yeah, what's interesting about those last few chapters of Job is he starts off those questions to Job, those rhetorical questions to Job.
Right.
He starts them off with, brace yourself, gird up your loins. I'm about to ask you some questions.
Right.
When I was younger, I always thought that sounded tough. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, that kind of sounds tough. But now, as I've been doing interviews with people, I realize how literal that is. Yeah. Because I've interviewed people that refuse to answer my questions.
Wow.
Because they know what it will cost them. You know what I'm saying? And so they don't want to answer like a man. And I've been in debates where pastors refuse to answer. Instead, they engage in ad hominem, personal attacks, or whatever. Right. And these are pastors, right? They're not supposed to act like that. Right. But the veneer comes off because they realize they are too afraid of what the actual truth is, and they won't even answer the questions. So it's very fascinating to see the interaction with Job, because he does get restored, because he does answer. Well, at least he endures the questioning. And admits that he's unworthy, basically.
Right. And again, the fact that God, not just free will, but God seems to have created randomness that even he shielded from. There was an old line from Einstein. You may have remembered it from back in the day, which was God doesn't play dice. And then it turned into an argument between he and Hawking, even though Hawking, they didn't know each other because one was dead. But Hawking's like, oh no, God does play dice and blah blah blah. And Stephen Hawking didn't understand what Einstein was saying. Believe what you want about Einstein's math and his theories and everything. He was very quotable. The man had amazing quotes. And what I'm getting at there is that God, when he said God didn't play dice, he meant that God wrote dice. He created dice. So God, there's no throw of the dice that God wouldn't have intimate knowledge of in doing so, unless of course he limited himself to where kind of like people, where dice he doesn't know how the throw is going to go. He temporarily blocks that part out. Just I'm kind of curious how this is going to land. Kind of like with people, that conversation with Job shouldn't have happened in a perfect structure type thing. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. It's interesting because the entire conversation with Job only happened because of chapters 1 and 2, where Azazel, that Satan character, goes to heaven and asks God, can I mess with Job?
Sure.
So think about this for a minute, because a lot of Christians overlook this part of the book of Job.
Yeah.
And they think, because they don't understand the firmament reality that is described in Scripture.
Right.
So that means he still could go up to the top layer of the firmament and present himself to the Almighty.
Right.
Because it says on that occasion, the angels came before God and Satan came with them. And then God responds, where have you been?
Never.
As if he doesn't know.
Thank you, by the way, for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Never forget, and I know I'm belittling the point here, but you guys understand. Never forget that in the big scheme of things, Azazel is an employee of God, right?
Well, I personally, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, what here? I'm saying, I know I'm not going to be able to do the mortal equivalent, but I'll give you one really quick. You remember Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or was it Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Willy Wonka, the first one with Gene Wilder, right?
Yeah, the actual one.
Yeah, exactly, the one that matters. What everyone overlooks at the end, the very end of the movie, was glossed over in like 10 seconds, which was Slugworth, the evil guy, the evil German guy that came, that was tempting the kids, that set the kids all up to fail. He shows up at the end, right? Walks right into Willy Wonka's office, kind of like, and Charlie's like, oh my God, it's him. And oh no, it's Mr. Slugworth. He works for me. And then just waves him off, right? And that's it, right? And that in that moment, you realize all the kids were set up to fail. Mm-hmm. He knew how the whole thing was going to play out. He knew that Charlie may or may not actually give the thing back at the end. But the fact was, there was no bad guy, no official bad, no anonymous self-creating bad guy. He had the whole thing scripted, which is why I tell people, look at everything. There's a plan in all of this. You just don't see it yet. But sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, now you're jumping into some deep philosophy, right?
I do. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. No, it's okay, because Christians argue this all the time, and it goes off of actual philosophy from ancient Platonism, and then it became Neoplatonism, and it's this idea of a determinism.
There you go.
And that's what you're talking about, right? Yep. Which is the idea that the creator of all things must know, and some people take it to a different degree. So not only that he must know everything's going to happen, but Christians around the age of the reformers, the 15th, 16th century, they took it to a greater degree to say all evil is actually co-signed by God. And that's where you run into some serious moral issues with. And then they try to use the story of Job and Satan coming before God to ask to tempt Job,
right?
For their justification for that thought, that philosophical premise of determinism, that both good and bad, sin and good behavior, is both co-signed by God. But then that makes God the author of evil, which goes against the general premise of the God of the Bible. So this is where I think it's so important to know the greater amounts of literature that comes from the history of the written scriptures, like Jubilees and Enoch, where it directly tells you that Satan was just a rebellious employee, who went off script and decided that he needed, and they end up creating the Nephilim, who then are now what Jesus encountered as the unclean spirits, because they lost their bodies in the flood, or before the flood technically. But these were created, as it says in Enoch 15, they were created in order to destroy and tempt mankind. So mankind had a genuine enemy trying to kill it. And it was these rebellious angels with their genetically mutated and hybridized offspring that were not just different in the way they looked. They didn't look like normal men, but they were actually partially a spiritual being, which is different than mankind. This is why once they lost their body, they're still around as unclean spirits, only to be finally destroyed at the second coming of the Messiah. So this is the story of the scriptures, and why it's so important for Christians, and in my opinion, people that are considering, is the scriptures real and should I even care, to know all this backstory, because it is the world we encounter today. Right? When you see the leaders of the world intentionally making decisions to destroy people, and you're like, what? Why? Well, it's because they've adopted the philosophy and the mantra of the Watchers and the Nephilim, which they made themselves enemies of mankind. So there's even a joking, like political commentators, like conservative political commentators and others, they even jokingly use this phrase nowadays when they're analyzing politics, and they'll say it's the death cult. Like, all these policies are trying to kill people. Like, they're pro-abortion, they're pro-euthanasia at all ages, they're pro, poisons in our food, they're pro, like poisons in our sky, poisons on our crops. Like, it's a death cult. You know what I mean? So it's funny to see, like, why would anyone be motivated to ascribe to that kind of stuff? Well, many of them do so because they believe in a deterministic God who claims that he gave the okay for the wicked to be wicked. And that's technically not what the Bible says. He actually says he hates those people that are wicked. He's going to come back and judge them and actually establish order on the earth in the future. That's the goal.
No, I gotcha. And at the higher levels, you're probably right. There are some people that do it for evil's sake. But as you know, to tempt men, and women lesser so, to tempt men, it doesn't take much of a carrot, right? To do it. Between power and money or sexual things or whatever, it is not tough to do. Everyone's got a price when you get to that certain level, and those prices are easy to. Oh, by the way, real quick, I didn't want to forget this. You want to see, I'm sure you probably watched them, or one of them at least, 2 movies lightly based on Job, which in mainstream would have been Bedazzled. Oh my God, watch it. The first one, which was Dudley Moore, that played Job, basically, but it was a different name, Stanley Moon. And
wait, are you talking about the 1970s show where he's like an ancient BC and he's an idol maker?
No, not that one. No, it was in modern day London, which would have been, I think, around the late 1960s. But the modern, they remade it with Brendan Fraser in early 2000s, directed by Harold Ramis, and it's where the devil is tempting a single character in multiple timelines, and he would, gave him his wishes, and that was the whole point. It's like, okay, and all the wishes, of course, turned out bad, and in the end, the devil and God had a dialogue, but yeah, God let it happen. And it's like, okay, I'm pretty sure, he's gonna hang tough.
Yeah, what's interesting about Job is that he does say to Satan, yes, but you cannot. He says you can do this, but you cannot do these other things to him. So he does, and this is why this is why Satan, the second time in chapter 2, he complains to God and says, well, but you've put a hedge of protection around it. And he goes, well, in the dialogue, God ends up saying to Satan, you can, something to the effect of, you can go after him, but you can't you can't kill him, basically.
No. Right. You got to set up some ground rules. Right. You're going to do stuff like that. So otherwise you get ugly really fast.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I personally think that's we see that in the book of Jubilees, where in chapter 49, it talks about the Exodus from Egypt, and how Satan was actually locked up for 4 days during the time when they left Egypt, and when started to travel towards the actual Red Sea before it crossed. And that's when Satan was let back out, was when he convinced the Egyptian rulers and their armies to go after him and meet him at the Red Sea. So that's what the book of Jubilees claims. And so then, if that's true, then that's a perspective that the average person doesn't understand. And I hope to portray this, that Satan's not all powerful, or any malevolent forces that are out there, according to scripture, that he's not all powerful. He's actually at the whim of the ultimate lawmaker, which is the creator of heaven and earth.
There you go.
And so he has to abide by certain rules. Otherwise, he's not going to ask permission to tempt people.
It is, yeah, it is. Well, not to go into writing. I do love good writing, which is, look, the hero's journey. The villain
Yeah.
defines the hero, and they have to be, even if it's an illusion, they have to appear to be somewhat evenly matched in some aspect. Even
Yeah.
though, come on, Superman can can take out all his villains simultaneously if he wanted, but he doesn't, because what's how does that work out? That's a
Lex always
short.
pulls up a green rock at the right time.
Yeah, that's
So
a
it's,
short story. Yeah, exactly. The
yeah.
green rock out of nowhere. I don't know. Always the freaking green rock. But again, it's the illusion of it. So yeah, I
So
understand.
there's a unique passage in the Wisdom of Solomon, and it says that the creation relaxes itself on behalf of those who do what's right. And so, it's inversely, it says that it goes against, it will actually rebel against the behaviors that are not designed for it, right? So this is why in the covenant in the Old Testament that God's explaining to the Israelites, he's like, look, if you do all these things, everything's going to go well. Your crop will be in due season. You'll have rain. You'll have peace with your enemies. Everything will be good. You'll have joy with your families. But if you start doing all these wicked behaviors like all these other nations, your land will be famine ridden. Your enemies will start invading you. You'll be weak and sick. And so this is what we see unfold throughout all nations throughout time. Is when they lose their moral fiber, the creation rebels against them in order to wipe them off the earth. And so this is a very unique concept where, and then you got someone like Jesus Christ comes along without sin, and he can just heal people at random. He can calm the seas at will. He can do all the miracle. He can walk on water because according to scripture, the creation relaxes itself on behalf of the righteous, meaning basically it lends itself to work with those who do what's right. So it's a very interesting paradigm. And what I'm seeing when I see the world start, the information age has exploded with the internet. And now specific truths have come out that are causing more of a ruckus than other truths. Right. So think about it like this: 1995 to 2000, the internet starts really getting out there. AOL, everyone's making fun of their AOL messages.
Right.
The average preacher is not jumping online because they don't realize the power of it yet.
Yeah.
But then they start to go, wait a minute, I can reach more people than just my community by getting online and talking about the Bible. So, missions made easy, right? Like I can do that. And so then they start trying to do that. But then it becomes people who aren't explicitly going to church and trying to learn about the creator suddenly get hit with the truth, like where we live and the shape of where we live.
Yeah.
And like my co-host on Uncommon Ground, Whistleblowers, he actually was brought to Christ and faith in Christ because of biblical cosmology.
Yes. Oh, so many people have.
Yeah.
Y'all forgive me. Did you attend some of the Take on the World conferences?
Yes.
Okay.
2021, I was there.
Okay. I heard, I don't think it was that year. I think it was a year earlier, could have been 2 years earlier, which was, I had heard from a lot of people in the Christian community that one of the things that the whole biblical cosmology or flat earth or enclosed world or whatever you want to call it did was it gave people a resurgence towards spirituality, towards, it's just like, because again, the obvious, which is if we're giving this world a structure, if this world actually has a structure, that means it was built, that means it was created, and it had to have been created by someone. And then you're really just splitting hairs. Who are you going to think it's going to be? It can only be one of two things. And because of that, I got letters from so many people that said, oh yeah, I'm back in the church now because because now I it gave them those extra few percentage points that had them on the fence. They'd gotten lazy, and it's like, I haven't been to church in years. Now I'm going back. And I heard that's from people in the Take on the World conference. It's like they'd never even seen a recruiting tool that got people back into the pews that this did for obvious reasons.
Right. And then they asked their pastor to explain it, and their pastor kicks them back out of the church.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a challenging topic because it forces people to take their Bible extremely seriously.
Right.
And the average Christian in the United States, at least, we've fallen into so many different denominations and so many different licenses to interpret differently,
right,
and still claim to be of the same faith. this is why when I saw this growing up, because my dad was a pastor for some time. Now he does, or he has orphanages in different countries, and then growing up, I became a Christian in '97 and tried to read my Bible throughout. And I was going to different churches, and I realized that all these different churches didn't agree with each other. And I was like, wait a minute. I read in Ephesians 4 that it's one body, one faith, one Lord, one Spirit. And like, we're supposed to be unified. Like, this is supposed to be like one body of God, like the family of God. Like, what's going on here? And I did more deeper research because that didn't make sense to me. And I thought, like, I don't want to be a part of something that's a sham. Obviously, that's not true. So, like, let's dig deeper. The most craziest thing is, how they say, like, I had this little track coach who used to tell me, keep it simple, stupid. That was his catchphrase, right?
I know it.
The KISS principle.
Yep.
And I started to apply that in my thought process of like trying to figure out why all these churches have these different interpretations and why everyone's so not undivided instead of unified. Yep. And I thought, I'll just keep it simple. And then I don't, maybe it's God. I don't know. Maybe, I attribute it to the Holy Spirit in my life, like leading me to truth, but I just started to define words.
Right.
And when I started to actually define words, I realized, oh, they're arguing over different definitions.
Sure.
And this is literally the extension of the original deception we see in Genesis 3 when the serpent says, did God really say this? Like, that was his opening line in the Bible. Did God really say this? Like, what if he meant this? You know what I mean? Yeah. And then he got Adam and Eve immediately to reinterpret the very, very, very plain instructions.
Yeah, creating doubt. Yeah.
Creating doubt. So when I talk to a pastor and I say, here's the definition of the firmament, here's how it was used in the flood, here's how it's going to be used when Christ returns, here's why it matters, because the New Jerusalem literally sets down through it on the earth. It's the Father's tabernacle that sets on the earth that all nations come to and learn how to behave properly. And they look at me and go, oh, what are you, a flat earther? And I'm like, okay, so I'm realizing now that you don't actually believe your Bible.
Right.
And then there comes this weird rub. Are they going to be intellectually honest? Are they going to, just cover their eyes and cog this? Yeah. And it's been quite the journey. So I guess a little bit, in addition to Rob Skiba, I definitely have you to blame for all the stress that I've experienced in the past 6 years with these pastors. But I really want to give you a big thanks, though, right? Because I know that do you consider yourself a Christian, or do you consider yourself someone that is still investigating? And
no. I mean, I never really swayed when, from my roots, which was, I was saved back, in my late teens. And then when I got into tech, again, if you have nothing but super heavy nerd friends, you're not going to church a lot. You're gaming on the weekends. Yeah, and true. It's like, it's fine, and I just like let things slide. But when I got into this, I developed a whole new relationship with God. So much more respect and so much more physical, practical, my own Enoch type of experience where, I'm looking at the model, because that's how I really got into this, was I was looking at the world in a whole new light, different eyes. And I was saying, okay, what were you trying to do here? Right. And everything I found was genius. It was absolutely brilliant. All the little nuances of where we are and the design perspectives was just amazing, to where every year, for the last 9 years, I'm still learning new things all the time, and which is why it's like, I thank God at least every week. And it's like, wow, you really did some neat stuff here. Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't understand it. A lot of people still upset with you, but I get it. I totally get it. And he has looked over me in ways, in hindsight, that I never, even going back to the fireworks thing, I should be blown into a million pieces so many times. There's so many blunderous, the old saying, fools rush in, where angels fear to tread. That was me. For a lot. I mean, whatever angels were looking over my shoulders, like, oh man, not again. Because I again, was naive. But now, yes, my belief in God Almighty and the power of the Creator of this thing is stronger than it's ever been. So there you go.
Well, that's encouraging. Yeah, because I know there's a lot of people in the the True Earth FE community that they do acknowledge that this place was created. They just still struggle with the God of the Bible itself.
Sure.
Yeah, because for whatever reason, maybe their upbringing, maybe some trauma, maybe just a lack of information, a lack of knowledge.
Yeah, and as you know, church sometimes again, it's easy for me to say because I grew up, in a evangelical Christian home. But I understand where it's sometimes rubs people the wrong way. It really comes down to who you're hanging out with and those first impressions, right? If it can go bad, and then you're digging your spirit, you're digging yourself out of a spiritual hole, and it's not always pretty.
So what? This is a fun question I've been pondering for the last few years, and I'm sure you've probably had the same thought. But and when I was talking to Witsit a few nights back, or like a month ago, we mentioned this briefly, but I really start to think that the deception, as the big deception as a whole, is generationally, like by next generation, 10, 15 years from now, it's going to get harder and harder to maintain the big lie, right? Especially unless they create like World War III and turn the internet off.
Yeah,
right.
But in that, you're losing your ultimate tool to influence,
to control. Yeah. So it's a double-edged sword for them. I always laugh and say that they create the internet thinking they control people, but actually they just allow people to find information out faster to break free from their deceptions. But ultimately, so my thought was, and I was telling Witz at this, I was like, look, what if they try to they see the trends and then they just try to say, look, we're just going to admit it. We're just going to say, yeah, you actually live in a structure and it was created.
Yeah.
But they're never going to give credit to the God of the Bible. They'll just say, and here is the panspermia progenitor who's returned. And he's the one who created this place.
You could do that. You could, I mean, oh God, there's so many theories, but yes, you could land a freaking golden spaceship in the middle of London and have whoever you want come out.
Yeah.
And as long as it seems somewhat legit, I mean, the internet would microscope it to death, so it's got to be somewhat real. There would be some people that would follow, which is probably why it hasn't happened. But it's a one-shot deal.
Yes, it is.
And you can't screw this up, which is why I think they're so nervous. The same reason why they've never gone back to the moon, right? And I joke, but I'm not kidding, where I say, look, if somebody came to me, because I consider myself a fairly clever problem solver, and you offered me $1 trillion, then you said, hey, can you help us fake the moon mission by 2030? I'd be like, no, there's no way I could do it. Someone's going to screw up. There's going to be a little mistake that's going to be made, and that's all. It's just game over at that point. Sorry, let me do a separate tangent thing really quick. To give people an example, the very first Lord of the Rings movie, you probably knew this, or maybe you didn't. If you can find it on the internet, I'm pretty sure, which is it made it all the way from inception, all the way to theatrical cut. And all of a sudden, somebody in the middle of, I don't know, LA or New York is watching the movie, and the hobbits are leaving the Shire, and there's a road off in the corner of the screen, and there's a white car driving through it. And they're like, and he's like, what the hell is that thing doing there, right? Imagine the hundreds and thousands of people that watched that film and edited and sound and all the splicing, and nobody caught that because they were staring in the wrong place. They weren't staring off in the corner. They were staring. It's like, the hobbits look pretty real. We're running through the Shire. Yeah, it's like, forget about the car, right? That's all it would take, right? Which is in the, if you want to fake anything, I don't care if it's Project Bluebeam or the moon mission or whatever, you better nowadays, like you said, the double-edged sword. The internet microscopes everything to such a level, you can't screw it up because it sticks. You can't pull it off. There's no magical thing that can scrub anything from the internet. If it's out there for 10 minutes, it's over.
That's right.
So
that's a PSA to all the young ladies listening. Do not do OnlyFans. Anyway,
no, definitely don't do it. I mean,
do it.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because, how the economy's set up, there's so many people that, that especially Gen Zers, they're scrambling for money, and they'll do anything. Like, look, we gotta, it's all about the Benjamins, or in this case, all about any money. And so, women, don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it, guys.
Don't do it.
Feed pics are not worth it.
No, it is not worth. Well, yeah, because again, it sticks with you.
Right.
Which is
you'll have trouble finding relationships and jobs later in your life.
Oh my God, yeah, especially jobs. Yeah. Although who knows nowadays, depending on what HR person you're dealing with, it'd be like, hey.
Yeah. Yeah, I recognize you.
Yeah, well,
Um,
the worst is when I see teachers doing it, by the way, when you
yeah,
write
and
about
there
that.
are, yeah,
It's like,
there's,
how dumb are you? Come on. And they have no regrets, like, "You know how much money I was making?" It's like, "Oh, okay, well,
yeah, well, stop teaching and just do that then.
yeah," it's like,
Yeah,
you wasted your master's, but that's
yeah.
fine, I guess.
Hard shift here, hard segue.
Yeah.
O'Neill colonies, Jeff Bezos, given live speaking presentations about the goal for humanity by the year 2050 to live in O'Neill colonies. Are you familiar with those ideas?
No, give me what's another
So
term for
an
the
O'Neill colony would be a livable habitat in low Earth orbit.
oh, yeah, that crap. No, no,
So
no.
even as like 2 or 3 years ago, he's still out there talking about this is the goal for 2050 and for those and for the future generation is to get the majority of the not the industrial class,
Yeah.
but more like the the administrative class, right? It's like Elysium, like the movie Elysium with Matt
Oh, yeah,
Damon.
no, I know that movie well. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, no. No, in fact, all the space story, I read space stories every week on my Tuesday thing. And it is just to reinforce space. That's all it is.
Mhm.
It is a headline. And when you are an eccentric billionaire tied to a company that's highly media friendly, whatever you say is instant headlines. Jeff Bezos actually doesn't even get a tenth of the headlines that like Elon gets. Right. I've got family members that swear that he is the smartest man in the world, that he is the why the news media hasn't like put him and Tony Stark right across from each other in a picture and like doing some sort of morph. I have no idea. And I try to
Well,
remind anyone that
they could just take the screenshot from Iron Man 2 when they shook hands.
oh, don't get me started. Every what kills me is again the power of perception. Power perceived is power achieved. The media has drilled into people. It's like, oh, look what he's done, and I'll call people on. I go, really? What's he done? Tell me exactly how he made his money. Tell me exactly what he's doing right now. Did he engineer anything at SpaceX? No. Did he build Tesla? No, he bought it. Did he start PayPal? No. Thank God they removed that from Wiki. Everything, the underground bullet train from San Francisco to Los Angeles. No, the super plane that's going to go to China in 2 hours. No, he was going to save those kids with his little mini submarine in that cave. No, just went, again and again and again. He just says stuff and then people assume it happened. So when he says, oh no, I've got a Mars program, it's absolutely going to happen, in 2040, right? At the same time, I read a headline just last week and the headline was SpaceX rocket launches and doesn't explode. That was the high point. It's like,
Right.
really? That's your high point, that it didn't detonate 2 minutes after launch?
And we're still talking about not only can he not consistently, or supposedly the narrative that they give to him is that he can't consistently put a rocket up that works. But then when it does work, it somehow lands backwards.
Oh, the exact opposite than any engineering student would ever tell you. That is
Right.
not how you land a cylinder.
Right.
It does
Yeah.
not work that way.
Yeah.
Not to mention little things. I don't want to go off in a rant, but come on. The average person doesn't realize, like, look, only the Americans even said they went to the moon, stopped in 1972, and none of the other launch-capable countries, that being China, Japan, Europe, Russia, and who is the fifth? I don't even remember. It doesn't matter. None of those guys even tried. No one's even tried to. So when I keep hearing these stories like, oh, what these new astronauts, like the new space race between China and the United States, it's like, oh, what to expect? It's like, you're not going to expect anything because you're scared to death to fake it, because you don't know how to fake it well enough with your tech that some nerd in Nebraska in his underwear at 3 a.m. is going to figure out in 2 seconds, just on a he's going to turn on his computer for the first time. It's like, oh, that doesn't look right. Right. And he's going to crop it. He's going to fire it off the internet and it's over. It's game over. So no, the entire space program has not aged well. It is unfortunate. It is unfortunate because retrospect, in fact, in the last year, I've realized that America, when they pulled it off in the 1960s, was the perfect time to do it. And they got away with it. And the whole world believed them. When I talk to people outside this country, outside the United States, well, inside, we're almost required by law to believe in the space program, right? It's like the Americans went to the moon. Those brave boys, if you talk to someone, and you see a single tear roll down their eye and fall off and turn to a bald eagle and fly away, well, you're not going to be able to get to them. But everybody else, I say, hey, you people of Sweden, why do you think the Americans went to the moon? Right? Everyone says the same thing. I don't care what country. They say, well, because it was on the news. And your news would never lie about something like that. And I look and I smile and I go, you don't know us at all.
Right. Yeah.
If just for anyone that listens to this podcast outside the United States, if it benefits us at all, the media will lie about it. We are the greatest show on earth, right? And that's how we marketed ourselves after World War II, and we never stopped. And it's been eroding at the seams. The stage has been falling apart, but we're still pushing forward. No, America, we are the what Russia calls us the nation of deception or something along those lines. The empire of lies. That's what they call us. And it's like, they're not wrong. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I love the people in this country. I don't love the leadership.
Again, there's the line, because of the carrots that we offer people, the line to get to those people. I mean, yeah, you could wipe out all of Congress and all the Senate, and there's a whole new crop ready to, willing to replace them. I mean, come on,
it's definitely a battle. Have you heard of the ancient philosophy of the Labyrinth?
Refresh my memory.
Well, it's just the simple idea of a labyrinth as a philosophical system of control. So remember in ancient Greece, they had the labyrinth with the Minotaur. Yeah, and the brave warrior supposedly trying to, go down there, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then they've archaeologists have uncovered massive labyrinth in Egypt near Aswan, one of those pyramids down there. And it was actually also discovered archaeologically in the Bible. The city of Jericho was built as a labyrinth. And so it's interesting. You have all these instructions in the Bible, how the Creator, the Almighty, is telling, believers, telling Israel, he's saying, follow my ways. I will make your paths straight. Do not turn to the right or to the left. I will make your paths straight. Even if it means him stepping in from time to time to create a miracle like the Red Sea and and literally make your path straight. So it's interesting because the ways of the nations all around who were enemies of the Creator, they employed a system of control that falls in line with the philosophy of the labyrinth, which is if you escape the labyrinth, you've reached enlightenment. And once you reach enlightenment, then you escape the evil spirits that taunt you in the labyrinth. But no one technically ever escapes the labyrinth.
Right. Kind of like, don't forget how casinos are deliberately designed.
Right.
People say, why is it so hard to get through this place? Because that's how it was designed. You're not supposed to find, the exits are almost impossible to locate from the center. Almost impossible.
Yeah, so there's traces of this that we see all throughout the philosophy of the God of the Bible is like, hey, it's simple, tell the truth, do what's right, God will protect you and fight for you, and including revealing the deceptions around you so that your life can be easier to walk that straight path. But the nations around them dealt in deception perpetually, and even to the point of I have a whole series I'm doing right now called the 42 series, where I'm breaking down this historical perspective about the nations and how they interacted with the Israelites, and how the Israelites were swayed over time in different generations to actually abandon Yahweh and adopt the ways of the nations and start delving into this depravity and deception again. And so it's interesting that one of their ideas was something that we still see today, and it was from ancient Chaldea or ancient Babylon, and it was called the Asapu. And you may appreciate this if you're a film lover like I am, then you understand like the original movie, The Exorcist, is a modern day depiction of the Asapu from ancient Babylon. And it is, you remember the demon that shows up in the room at the end of the Exodus? Sure. Or the Exorcist? Exorcist, yeah. I can't remember his name right now, but that's a specific demon that was actually the people that wrote The Exorcist. Like if you go online and look at fan groups about that movie, they're actually mad because the writers of the movie twisted the theology by making that demon that shows up at the end the bad guy. When in ancient Babylon, it's the good guy who's a part of the white magic, fighting off the evil spirits of black magic. And that the guy who carries the case, who shows up, he's the Asapu. He's the exorcist / magician that knows how to take control over the bad black magic spirits and remove them from people's lives by replacing them with the white magic spirits. But the God of the Bible says, whether you want to call them black or white, good or bad, they're all evil spirits there to deceive you. So like this is what Jesus talked about, where he says, if you cast out an unclean spirit from somebody, it goes to dry and arid places, seeking so that he may bring back 7 times stronger. He'll bring back 7 more demons. And then the condition of the man is worse than when he first began. So this is where obviously the man who got exorcised originally needs to fill himself up with good things and stop doing the bad things, so that the door is not left open for 7 times worse to come back on him, right?
Yeah.
But that's the way they work. Is that he was revealing, which was the ancient understanding of the Asapu. He would go in to remove the bad spirit so then he could replace it with the good spirit. And they held in high esteem these Asapu in their cultures because they were considered magicians as well as exorcists. They even have entire hieroglyphs filling walls full of their rituals and how they did this line by line. And it's literally what Catholic priests engage in today.
Did not know that.
So my heart goes out to everyone that follows Christ and is a part of the Catholic Church, because you want to know God in genuineness. But unfortunately, the leaders of that particular denomination have strayed from the biblical preachings many hundreds of years ago.
Sure.
And to the point where now they even claim papal infallibility, which they think that the Pope can't be wrong. Right. Like his word is gold, his word is bond. So like they've moved far away from putting their faith in the God of the Bible.
Yeah.
And now they're big proponents, not only of literally George Lemire, the Jesuit priest that comes out with this Big Bang Theory in a court to shore up the Celio model, but now we got the Pope saying he'll baptize aliens if they show up.
Right. I remember that. And to your point, I remember, if I had to pick, people have asked me, it's like, well, who would you put at the top of the authority food chain? At least in terms of men. And I'd say, well, I'd go with the oldest. Usually it's the one that's still standing, and that would be the Vatican. If people forget, it's like, look, the Vatican is the remnants of the Roman Empire, the one that influenced everything that we still use today on a lot of stuff. It's like, yeah, they don't have a standing army everywhere, and they don't go on huge marches, but they're still around, at least in physical, political, and monetary power.
Why do you need a standing army when the leaders and kings of other nations come and kiss your ring?
Right. And you've got your own country that's in the middle of, this tiny little country and look, they do fascinate me in terms of, the secrets that they keep. I would love to sneak into one of their libraries or one of their special things, because the stuff that if you had to pick a group that collects all the weird stuff, in a vault, that would, people say, well, like the end of Indiana Jones, which wasn't just a movie, where's that big warehouse full of stuff, right? The Americans have. No, the Vatican has a warehouse like that. I am sure of it, that they're constantly, stuff that they're not going to show the world for various reasons.
Yeah. And I'm going to have to refrain from going off on that tangent. But I wanted to introduce that idea to you because, just to show more and more, not just on the topic of the shape of creation, but also in the machinations of deceptions that we see the nations employing to keep people not believing in the truth that we see in the scriptures. Yeah. Because what do they tell us with the heliocentric narrative? They tell us we're going to suffer a supernova heat death in 200,000 years. Right. So be afraid now. And by the way, we need to get off this rock because we're killing ourselves with global warming or climate change, whatever buzzword you like. So we need to get off this rock, which is immediately anxiety inducing, as far as like, well, I sure hope they figure it out, and of course, take all that tax money, redivert it into things that are not actually being done or discovered or invented. And then you've got theft on top of lies, on top of the idea that there's a boogeyman coming after you, and that's your planet's dying, your galaxy's dying. Oh, yeah. We need to get out of here. It's the evil spirit in the labyrinth, but we don't know how to get out of here right now. It's the same philosophical trap and mental maze that they have us in since birth, telling us this is where you are. It's a dangerous place, this place where where you live is gonna end, as well as all this around us. We've got to get out of here,
Yeah.
but we don't know how yet. So trust us, give us your homage, which is your devotee to a god,
Yeah.
and then we'll find the answer for you at some point. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
Trust
in science, which became scientism. I have never slept so well as when I got into the whole enclosed world biblical cosmology thing. Never slept so well, because I wasn't that worried about space anyway, because what are you going to do, right? But I mean, come on, all gamma ray bursts, black hole, meteors every freaking month now. It's like, oh, this meteor could come within blah blah. Never happens. And then of course they've got the coincidental. Oh, it's a meteor shaped like a jack-o'-lantern, and it's next to Halloween. Wow, or a Christmas, or the Christmas meteors, or whatever it is. Once you get into this, you realize, oh yeah, there's nothing's going to get you. By the way, and people think, oh well, no, that fear is real, and what are meteors and shooting stars? Like, really? Don't ask that. The question you should ask is, with 6 billion smartphones out there, why isn't there a single video of a rock going from sky to ground?
Right.
Not one. And there's more people have smartphones than have running water now. And I'm like, what? Nobody next to a beach, nobody on a cruise boat, nobody in a boat. Remember, supposedly 3 out of 4 should hit the drink, because it's mostly water out there, right? Don't even have one. I'd love to see a video of an actual meteor hitting the water. Nothing ever hits. It's just lights in the sky that blow up somewhere near the ground. We all seen those videos, right? Mm-hmm. And that's all you get.
What's your theory on that?
Oh, what do I think meteors are?
Yeah.
Oh, I think they're just stagecraft. That's all they are. I mean, okay. Somebody said, the easiest way to do it, he goes, think of like throwing a rock into an aquarium, right? Even if it was physical, right? Then all you're using is some sort of high-speed, railgun technology, biblical railgun technology, and you're firing at a shallow angle. Let the nitrogen and oxygen, burn it up before it hits. That's all you'd really have to do. But the rest of it is, again, just lights in the sky. Sorry, one more thing really quick. Speaking of statistically impossible things, do you remember the movie Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, Gravity?
Oh yeah.
Where she was like, she fell out of a spacecraft and actually made to Earth without dying, over a 2-hour movie period.
Yeah.
What was the whole premise? People forget what the premise of that movie was a satellite knocked into another satellite and then started collecting more satellites, and then was just this big wall of jagged metal that eventually ran into the space shuttle, right? Why hasn't that happened yet? You got to remember that no satellite supposedly has ever hit another satellite. Decades and decades of this, because once it happens, it becomes systemic. Right? Once it happens, it can't be stopped. It's not like you can course correct a damaged satellite. If that was real, the whole sky should turn into the outside of, which I think it was funny, of WALL-E. You remember the animated movie WALL-E, where they punched through it but all the satellites weren't perfect. They weren't even moving. It's like, no, that's supposedly not how it would work. Or the meteor showers that nobody course corrects satellites to avoid. It's like, oh, here's a seasonal meteor shower. It's like, well, shouldn't all the satellites have to move, get out of the way? Yeah. Nope, never happens. Television stations, radio station, nobody has. There are no. I've never run into a story about a collision of anything up there where something just went down. When's that? People just gloss over it. It's like, again, it's a plot hole, kind of like how Skynet became alive, right? In the Terminator movies, which was like, it's like, oh, it became self-aware. How did it happen?
Yeah, they can't explain.
It doesn't matter. Part. We're moving on. We're moving on. It's a plot point. It's like, yeah, but you're not going to explain. Nope, we're not. It's like, okay, sure.
Well, that's actually a great question. What are your thoughts on stuff like ChatGPT and the supposed artificial intelligence?
It's all hype. Look, I come from the computer world. I will tell you exactly what it is, right? I'm an authority on this. I will give you the straight dope. Self-aware computers are a joke. They're a fantasy. ChatGPT, I'm old enough to remember when AI used to mean self-aware, right? There was a Haley Joel Osment movie directed by Steven Spielberg. It was like, oh, a robot kid that all of a sudden started asking theological questions on his own. The only way it even happens in movies, right? 3 things. Either radioactive goo hits the circuit board, lightning hits the circuit board, or the circuit board is possessed by either an alien or a demon. That's it. That's all you have. You have those three things. That's how they explain it away.
That's true.
And if they don't, then they do the Skynet thing where it's like, well, it just happened. Or the great 70s movie. This is not a new concept, by the way. This is a story going all the way back to Colossus, the Forbin Project, which was a 1970 movie. It was like a massive computer just became self-aware. How did it happen? Look, computers only do what they're told. They can only do what the code tells them. They can't just break out and go off in a whole different path and then start imagining all this stuff and creating their own robots that want to kill humanity. Doesn't work that way. ChatGPT, well, you saw it. I mean, when ChatGPT came out months and months ago, right? People started hammering with it and they found the flaws immediately. And they saw the repetition. Okay. All AI is right now, it's not going to change anytime soon, it's software that can talk to other software. It's integrated software packages that you build the interfaces and you can compile things. So for the education community, it's a nightmare. So like if I was a teacher, I would never, or a professor in a university, I would never assign an essay ever again, because all you'd have to do, like there was a kid, in fact, I knew him. It was a freshman in college here in Washington State, right? They got thrown out first semester, thrown out of school because she used ChatGPT to write a paper. Why? It was too polished. You have to be, what I said is you have to be literal. You have to tell the computer, okay, write me a paper on this science subject, make 2% grammatical errors and throw in exactly 4 spelling errors, right? Maybe, right? You have to smudge it up. You have to make it look more human. But no, it's people write these perfect papers and it's like, but no, self-aware, no, never, ever. Why? Sorry, one more thing is because we can't even come up with a way. I can't even come up with a fictional way. I challenge Elon, if he's ever listening to this, it's like, really? Tell me the flow chart, how you even start that process, and tell me how many decades it would take. The closest you'll ever get, I'm sorry, one more thing real quick. I'm passionate about this one, which is there was a movie that was about the cracking the Enigma machine, the German war machine, called The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch. Brilliant movie. Computers, by the way, were invented by the British during World War II. And then when it was done, because he created the very first computer, they had to tear him down. They marked him as classified and they never gave him to the public. So we had to wait decades later until we reinvented them again, whatever. But he came up with his thought was initially, he came up with the Turing test. His name was Alan Turing, which was the test that you give computers like during Blade Runner and stuff like that. Questions you ask computers, machines, to find out if they're machine or human. He goes, the closest we'll ever get is an imitation. Before it was called the Turing test, it was called the imitation game, because the closest you'll get is a mimic, which is, even if you could get all the possible responses of whoever it is, right? All the different questions, even if you could that, they're just parroting you. That's all they're doing. Insight? No, because we can't even explain insight now. It's like defining the human soul, right? It's like, what? Define your soul. Okay, then write some code that can actually do that. It's like, no.
I think it's Job 29:7. Speaking of the book of Job, that says it's the breath of the Almighty that gives understanding to man.
There you go.
But when you say, can we explain it? That's a descriptor, but can you explain how it works? Like on a physics level, man can't do that right now. No. But as far as like, what if ChatGPT and other like programs, what if they're just taking all the inputted answers and responses from the users and then formulating a more adept and human-like response?
Sure. I mean, again, that's what they're trying to do. And there's a wonderful British movie. It was the British version of what Machina, which was, but the British version is called The Machine, which really should have been called in the first place, with Toby Stevens, which was, he was asking a computer the Turing test, some Turing test. There's no standard Turing test. You just make it up as you go along. You try to trip up the computer, usually asking stuff about emotions and stuff like that, because the computer doesn't know what to do with emotions, right? But to your point, they're compiling things, but human beings have to connect the dots. They've got to create the flowcharts to where everything's connected. Yes, it can sound somewhat human in text, but that's about as far as it's going to go, right? It's not. You might be able to fool the average person with some text, some back and forth with text for a little while, until you start asking the tough questions. Stuff about religion or emotions, or even personality preference. Yeah, they'll give you some canned answers, but after a while, they will sound canned. So it can only go so far. I don't think it's ever well between that and of course the power problems, which we're never going to solve. By the way, another Terminator thing. People forget how plot holes, the huge plot holes in science fiction movies, which was the power problem. We will never. People say, "Oh, we'll have robot servants." It's like, no, you won't, because you'll never solve the power problem.
Right.
Our battery technology is limited, really, really limited, unless you come up with cold fusion, which is a myth. And if you could say, "Oh, we'll just use tiny little reactors." Oh, okay. So you're going to give people weaponized things that the average person could just take apart and then blow up a city block with it.
Right. Or if it malfunctions, it blows up a house.
Well, yeah. Sorry. One more thing along those lines, because I got to point out the plot hole. Terminator 3, which was, you saw that he had these 2 reactors in his chest, right? You know, that if we're damaged would blow up immensely, right? And it's like, well, that's a problem, because one was crushed in the first Terminator by Sarah Connor in that press. It's like she would have died and the factory would have blown up. And it blew up again when he dumped into the molten metal in Terminator 2. But okay, we're just going to go that way. A few years later. Sorry.
No, you're right. There's a lot of whole plot holes there. Crazy. Speaking of, I'm so glad you brought up Terminator, because that's like part of my research has led me into realizing that automatons have been a thing all throughout history. Did you know that?
Sure. Why not? I mean, it's a goal. Any human beings are lazy. So yes, I think every civilization, well, think about it, every device we've ever made has been to give us more leisure. Right.
But this gets really crazy. So when I was researching this, not only did supposedly automatons exist, I'm talking much further than Leonardo da Vinci stories, right? Where he supposedly created, like for the King of France, he created like a lion or something that kind of walked a little bit, you know. The ancient Indians claim that they actually had an automaton like 3,800 years ago that was literally bodyguard protectors for rulers. Like full-on fighting automatons.
Well, when it comes
and here's the crazy part, though.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Here's the crazy part. They call them, I think they call them Yanka Vitra or Yanka Sutra or something like that, which translates to moving spirit.
I can see that, like the clay golem type thing, only mechanical.
Yeah, like so they even though they had this like metallic copper type of machine that moved, they claimed it was animated by something else.
Sure, I could see that. I mean, the saying is, and I've said this for years, which is, there's nothing new under the sun. We all know that, right? Which is, look, our civilization, you don't have to watch every season of Ancient Aliens to figure this out, right? Which is, come on, the sunken cities off of Japan are there. The sunken cities off of India, Pumapunku, Machu Picchu, Bimini Road, the Bosnian pyramids, the real pyramids, for God's sakes, they're right there. I mean, I went to Egypt just because I heard people that said, if you actually stare, stand at the bottom of the real pyramids and take a good look and stare at this and realize what you're looking at. It's like, and then you turn around and look at Cairo. Oh yeah, they had nothing to do with the building of this thing. I mean, this is engineering on a whole nother level. And if you have engineering on that level, then what couldn't you do? Meaning, the only thing that's stopping us from making robot servants, because Lord knows we want them. We've been wanting them for a long time. I mean, the Jetsons wasn't just a fantasy. The only thing that's stopping us is the power problem. If we could solve the power problem, we'd have. Then it would be what was that movie? Will Smith, when it was the robots? iRobot.
iRobot, yeah.
iRobot, which funny is because I've got a iRobot sitting over there. He vacuums my floor every Tuesday and Friday.
Right. Yeah, so it's fascinating because the same people that claim that they had like automatons that were sophisticated and guarded important people, they also claim to have vimanas, which flew in the air and
India. I'm sorry, India. I thought you were talking about Native Americans briefly.
No, sorry. No.
Oh no, India. Oh my God, yes, they're not even shy about it.
No, they're not. No, it's in their history. It's even talked about in the modernity by their archaeological professors, that they don't claim that this is myth. Like they claim that they had flying craft that could hold flying cities that hold thousands of people. Those are called pushpakas, the ones that could hold thousands of people. And so like it makes me wonder, like, if some of this tech might be reintroduced.
Sure.
to then escalate the absorption of, yeah, by the way, we do live in some sort of reality that's been constructed meticulously. What we were wrong. We're not just an accident that, from goo to the zoo.
Yeah.
Kind of evolutionary process. In fact, actually, all this was planned and orchestrated by our progenitors, and they're back, and they all got all this advanced tech, and you should serve them.
Well, there is that. I mean, there are people that would serve any of the older civilizations. By two quick things. One would be, do I believe that there are official aliens out there? Yes, there are many different kinds. However, do I think they're from Mars or Jupiter or Venus? No, not at all. I just think they're older versions of us, older civilizations that produce things. But I do think, and I know there's a biblical link to this, but I want to stay away for 1 sec, which is I do think that not only are we not the first people to rent this apartment, but there are rules to this place, meaning it's obvious that there aren't big armadas that are coming down and wiping out entire cities on a regular basis, right? That is one of the running jokes of ufology, which is, okay, if UFOs are real, why haven't they landed in Kansas yet and started taking selfies? And it's like, well, because it appears there's rules. And if anyone has any doubt of that, look up the greatest UFO sighting in our civilization wasn't Roswell. It wasn't 1899 Texas. It was 1561 Nuremberg. You can look it up. There's a wonderful wiki page on it.
It's a wild story about that.
Nuremberg, Germany, 2 giant space armadas just show up on a beautiful April day. Not a cloud in the sky, just start hammering on each other, right, for an hour. And then a third faction shows up, which was interesting. The ancient aliens left out that third faction out of their broadcast, which was weird. Third faction shows up, pulls up in between them. These two take off. And the big black, single angular craft, the scary one, eventually just pulls off and leaves. Huge questions there. One, okay, who was the first two that were fighting? Who was the third group? Were they the cops? Were they the UN? But the bigger question for me was, what sort of response time are we talking about here? There must have been a dead zone. Because look, I could point a gun out that window right now, fire off a few rounds. There's going to be cops here in less than 10 minutes. But you're telling me 2 fully equipped space aircraft carriers can just pound on each other for an hour to where the sketch artist drew the whole thing while eating their toast and Schnitzengluben? No, I'm not buying it. Not unless there's a dead spot. And so, yeah. But the point is there's rules. I think those 2 were not supposed to be there. And the third group was, who were they? Were they the superintendents? Were they some of the admins? Whoever they were, they don't buzz by New York on a regular basis, or Los Angeles or Paris. So
I'm glad that I love all the movie references, because if you ever have the time, if you want to binge something that you might think interesting, check out my Investigating Babylon and my 42 series, because I also love movies, and I think there's a lot of predictive programming in movies.
Oh, yes.
And not just predictive programming, but there's also revelation of the method in movies as well. So Greece, Mesopotamia, ancient India, even ancient like Malaysia and other countries, Egypt, the Chaldeans, the Assyrians, all the dominant countries that at one point had some sort of large presence or empire internationally, they all talk about flying machines up to 4,000 years ago. And they all talk about how it was their rulers that basically got to travel in them. It wasn't just the average person, right? But specifically, some of them all point back to, and not only in their hieroglyphs, but also in their writings, and they point back to different shapes of vimanas, of flying machines. And one of them was the shape of a sphere. And if you, and I hope tonight, just to give you a rabbit trail to investigate, if you haven't ever thought of it yourself, if you start going back and watching a lot of these movies, there is over and over and over and over again, there's an ominous sphere in a lot of these alien movies, a lot of these mystery movies. Not just the Michael Crichton movie Sphere in 1997,
or Starman.
And Starman was one,
from the 1980s.
Yeah, hundreds of fiction, books, movies, TV. There's a sphere. There's a black sphere. There's a. Did you ever see that show? I think it was Netflix or maybe Amazon Prime. It's called The Peripheral. There's a new series that just came out. So do you remember at the end of that series where they're revealing to her like the elites are revealing to the young girl like how the sickness came and destroyed like 80% of the world,
Right.
and it manifests in this hologram as a black sphere.
Yeah.
They're standing in that graveyard and she's getting shown all this.
Yeah.
That's just another small example, but there's tons and tons of examples. So the sphere, according to ancient Egypt, was considered the eye of Ra.
Ah, nice.
That looks down on mankind.
Sure.
And this is where I don't think it's a good thing. So this is where in scripture, there is a unique passage that talks about in Revelation chapter 8 that a large mountain burning with fire is thrown down from the sky.
Right.
And kicks off 42 months of chaos.
Right.
And at the end of that 42 months, the Messiah returns
Right.
and stops all of it.
Yep.
So I have this crazy theory.
Really?
This crazy theory that Vimanas are real, that they are used by the controllers, the elites, and that they know their time is short, and that the head of them is like what was referred to as Mount Meru, what was referred to as Mount Olympus, what was referred to as the boat of a million years that Ra flew in. It actually is physically embodied as an actual Vimana in the shape of a sphere. And so I'm just going to tease you with that, because if you have a chance, like if you are bored and want to binge some things, I go over all this history with great specificity and detail, both from the scholars and also in the scriptures. And I show all the links and correlations in my Investigating Babylon series and my 42 series. 42 series is ongoing. I'm still adding installments to it, but it also explains some very interesting things within the FE model as well.
Cool. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Send me whatever you got. I'll definitely take a look. Yeah.
So there's just it's such a big conversation, you know. It's like, it's so many questions I want to ask you, but at the same time, I'd love to have you back on again so we could do like a part 2 at some point.
Sure. You name the time. I'll be here.
But before we go, I just want to ask you, what do you see, like, because you've seen the last almost 10 years now since you put out your Flat Earth Clues videos.
Yeah.
So we got, you know, a good strong 9 years of seeing the pushback, seeing people break, like millions and millions of people every day are coming to the truth of where we live.
Yeah.
And realizing they've been lied to. And that's not slowing down, even though you can't see stats on it, you can't Google stats on it.
No.
The only thing you can probably see that's almost a real-time indicator is the, you know, David Weiss's app.
Yeah. And even that's stunted to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to remember, even the biggest Flat Earth channels, even after 9 years, are in the low 6 figures for subs, which is impossible considering what we can do and what we influence. I mean, come on, we got a Flat Earth mentioned on The Boys a couple days ago.
That's true. Yeah.
In episode 2, it was like, are you kidding me? It's like, really? It's like, that was awesome.
It's become a common joke, but it's funny that there's some pretty significant influencers that have stopped joking about it and are actually saying, you know, hey, there's actually some points here that makes me question the narrative, and I haven't heard good answers yet. So that's always a good starter place. But where do you see this going? So, like, I mean, we've had 9 years to experience, at least from our American perspective, and we see internationally, we see other people coming to the same conclusions all across the plane of the earth. Yeah. And so, where do you see this going?
For me, well, I can tell you where I want it to go, and I think it's going there. In fact, the only thing that really slowed us down was the pandemic. That was it. I mean, in 2019, for example, all the way up to the beginning of 2020, we could do no wrong. We were bulletproof. We were doing conferences in multiple countries. We had endorsements. We had all sorts of fun stuff happening. But then the pandemic shut everything, to where we couldn't do any international travel. We couldn't even do domestic conferences for the most part, except for Karen B, who started doing them on her own and grabbing people, because we couldn't find venues that would let us do anything without masks. Because, as you know, most of the people in our community also don't believe in other things, like masks. But for me, it would be the where I think it's going to go eventually would be some version of the 100th monkey effect. which you may or may not know about, which was a real thing, which science I love it when science discovers something and then denounces their own thing. It's like, we didn't come up with this, you came up with this, which was the monkey effect, which was you give monkeys potatoes next to some body of water, salt water, and they were testing this on islands next to Japan after the war. And some of the monkeys would wash off the potatoes because they didn't want to eat sand, right? And then slowly but surely, more and more monkeys were watching each other. It's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. But once where it happened was, once it hit about the 100th monkey, all the monkeys now, and not just that monkeys on that island, every island, they all knew simultaneously, like genetically updated all the monkeys, even though they were not physically in contact with each other. And science denies this. It's like, no, it didn't happen. It's like, really? Because we didn't pull it out of our butts. Where'd you guys come up with it? So do I think it happens with every species? Yeah, I think it's a beneficial update. So my thought is that eventually there's going to be a tipping point, like with anything, like with peer pressure, which when it becomes less ridiculous to believe in flat Earth or enclosed world or biblical cosmology than to go against it, right? When less people laugh at it than the people that nod their heads, it's like, yeah, that's some truth right there. Then what happens is, I think the game is up. I think that would be, and again, I'm making a leap here, but I think that's our Tower of Babel moment, where God's like, okay, that's it, we're done. We got to move this thing along, right? And then Act 3 comes on, and I'm not saying a cataclysm comes. I'd like to believe in happy endings. I'm really a glass half full kind of guy.
Well, if you take the Bible seriously, you would believe in a happy ending.
I do believe in a happy ending, but I also believe in the hero's journey, which is, again, the Bible has all sorts of tragedies and awful things that happen. I mean, tons of them.
Well, the hero's journey for Christ, which is the main character of the Bible,
the ultimate hero's journey.
Yeah, is going to be that he returns and vanquishes the evil dragon.
Yeah,
and establishes peace on the earth and teaches all nations how to walk in his commandments, which they stop killing each other as a result. Yeah. So that's where the big question comes in, is if the Bible tells us that this has been the faith of Abraham. Have you ever heard that term, the faith of Abraham?
I have.
Okay, so like Christ is talking to the Pharisees at one point, and he's like, "You're not children of God if you," he says, "You're not children of Abraham if you were. You do the deeds of Abraham,"
right?
Because they were duplicitous, hypocritical, and doing bad stuff. And then, Jesus, of course, is sent as the Son of God to become a resurrected man, which means you had to die first, right? So there's like that, which is why he's praying in the garden, please, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me.
Sure.
But he endures the cross, gets resurrected, and he gets appointed as high priest of the covenant, and then ministers at the right hand of the Creator from the moment he ascended to heaven until now. So this is the story of the Messiah in the Bible. And this is where a lot of churches leave out the end part. They just stop at the cross part, like where he died on the cross, and that's where they stop, right? They leave out the end of it, which is where not only when he comes back, but he comes back with his Father's house. The place he said, "I go to prepare a place for you in my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, wouldn't I have told you?" Yeah, well, that place comes back down as the Zion, the New Jerusalem. Yeah. And at the end, it's also in Isaiah and Ezekiel, but Revelation 21 is where most people reference it. And it's described as something that's like almost 1,500 miles cubed.
Sure.
That's like most of the United States in width and length, and then in height also would be 1,500 miles cubed, 1,500 miles tall.
Right.
Which if you do on our show on Common Ground, Wes Blaze and I show an animation of someone that actually did the math, and it doesn't fit on a spherical Earth.
No.
In fact, it would be like, because it's described as a city 4 square.
Right.
So like that means you would have like, it sits down and like 121 miles between the outer edges of it and the curvature of the earth.
Right.
So basically the nations could not access it. Yeah. And it would throw off the tilt and it would fall into
it's a disaster. No, the physics would not work with that. Absolutely. Yeah. Just like the physics wouldn't work when and I know we can't go on forever, but the story of Joshua, where he asked God to hold the
sun on the moon.
And it's like, you understand how hard that would be if it was a solar system, right? To change the physics of that. And it's like, well, God's infinite. It's like, yeah, but God's not, it's more efficient as well. It's like, look, it's way easier just hit pause on the sky like you do on your television than it would be to change everything, including all the physics involved in the rotation of the Earth and the Earth flying around the solar system and everything else. Way easier to do that. So
yeah, in fact, you remember I told you at the beginning of this, I said I just started to trying to be as basic as possible, just defining my terms.
Yeah.
So when we see stuff like the account of the long day in Joshua, and people will, like, who are defending the global model, they'll say, well, God can do anything, like you said, he's infinite, he's power, he's without hindrance, so he could do anything. But I'm sitting there going, so then why couldn't he make a city that's 4 square and 1,500 miles cubed?
There you go.
And they'll be like, well, it's metaphor. And I'm like, no, it's not actually. It actually gives you the dimensions, the foundational layers. It tells you specifically that all the nations will visit it and bring their wealth and honor to it.
Sure.
Like, can you imagine, like, you would be able to see it from everywhere under the firmament at 1,500 miles tall, no matter if you were in Australia or on the outer edges in Antarctica, you would be able to see this thing.
I got to correct you there.
You don't think so?
Well, you can't. Well, you wouldn't be able to only the size. Yes, you absolutely would if it was a vacuum. But unfortunately for us, because the atmosphere is so thick, is that it would distort everything even less than.
Remember how we see up through the atmosphere?
I know you'd be okay. So sorry, let me clarify. You wouldn't be able to see. It would be a reverse fade. So you wouldn't be able to see it at sea level up to a certain point, but you'd be able to see the top of it. It would be it would be an interesting visual effect because it would look. In fact, it would look like it was still floating, depending on the atmospheric conditions.
Well, according to Enoch and everything else, it actually would be taller. That's
way taller than the atmosphere itself. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, if we can see up and see the sun and moon, which is above the atmosphere, from our perspective, then we'll definitely be able to see the top of it.
Yes, you would be able to see the top of it.
So the point is, you'd always have a visual reminder that you do not live in a ball in space.
Yes. Yeah. And sorry, one more thing along those lines was, and you'd be able to quote this better than me, that everyone would be able to see the second coming simultaneously, right, from everywhere, right? That's like what, and I've had people, I even had a pastor come at me, and because I said, well, how's that work in a globe? He goes, well, because they'll be watching it on television on the other side of the globe. I'm going, yeah, that's not really the same effect that I think God would be going for here. It's like, because you're watching on your phone. Yeah, no, sorry.
It's not. It's actually in addition to that versus Revelation 1:7 you're thinking of, but every eye will see him. In addition to that concept, there's even a unique passage in Psalm 48 that talks about how the kings of the earth assembled together, which is what you see happening in Revelation 19. The kings of the earth assembled together, but they saw the city of God and they fled in terror.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, if come on, we've never built anything like that. That reminds me real quick of why a lot of people don't know why the Native Americans finally surrendered, where they took some of their leaders and they took them to Washington, D.C. after Washington, D.C. was pretty much built. And it struck him with such awe as far as the engineering goes, right? Because the Native Americans didn't have engineering skills. And it's like, if they can build this, we have no chance at all. And that was it. That was like, he went back. It's like, no, we're packing this one in. So imagine us that could see, any sort of floating structure that was not just beyond our engineering capability, but octave above our engineering capability.
Yeah, we're talking a continent coming down, and this is what Hebrews 11 talks about. It says that Abraham, he believed in a heavenly country whose architect and builder was God, that's reserved in heaven, as 1 Peter 1 talks about, that's waiting to come down. And this is where the average person has no clue that the Bible teaches this. This is why we made it our mission. We call ourselves Kingdom in Context, because I growing up in church, I started to realize they're just talking about the cross, which, don't get me wrong, that's obviously important. We love and we praise Christ for his sacrifice to do what God sent him to do.
Right.
But that's not the entire book. That's not the end of the story. The end of the story is that God's house, which is massive, literally comes down through the firmament.
Yeah. So,
like, if I believe in this Bible and that it can be life-changing for people to know this knowledge and put their faith in the Creator and his Son, then I want to share all the details with them, right? Yeah. Because in doing so, it actually breaks through so many other lies that are keeping them subjugated currently.
Oh, imagine the humility, the massive wave of humility that would wash over people. They'd be like, I mean, every other conflict in your life becomes trivialized.
Yes.
almost instantly. I mean, not eliminated entirely, but it's like, yeah, you don't have any, whatever your passions were, have now been completely sidetracked. And well, free will kind of goes out the window at that point, because now you're worried.
I want to encourage you. You still got free will.
Oh, I'm sure.
It talks about that in Zechariah 14 and other places, that there will be nations that refuse to come to the New Jerusalem to observe the feasts of God, and their punishment is that they get no rain on their land.
Let me end with this. That reminds me of something. Again, part of this, which was the movie, the film Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, where they were asking, Bart Sabella was asking the astronauts to put their hand on the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And I took a different meaning than Bart did on this, because I understood, which was there's denial, and then there's knowing, committing a crime, committing an act when you know for sure that it's wrong. And because the astronauts, it's like, what are you talking about? They wouldn't put their hand on the Bible. It's called perjury. People do it all the time, right? And people, it's not a new thing. Why wouldn't they just put their hand on the Bible? It's like, I went to the moon. It's because for them, they know. I think with the Apollo astronauts, especially, they were privy to, okay, this is what the world looks like. This is why you can't tell anybody. And then in the back of their head, it's like, oh, then God is real. that everything everything biblical is real, and therefore, I think there's different rules, meaning you can't lie. It's a whole different set of fear. If you lie, it's one thing to lie if you think somebody's watching, a higher power is watching you. It's a whole other thing knowing someone is watching you. And I think for them, it really struck a chord. It's like, yeah, because remember, they didn't just say no. They walked away from that Bible like it was radioactive. They wouldn't get near this thing. It's like, wow, that really must be something for them. But then again, it kind of wrecked them in the end. Anyway, just something occurred to me.
That is a horrible pun. It wrecked them in the end.
Oh, sorry about that. Didn't mean that.
So, but this is fun to leave off on a fun note here, because you're absolutely right, brother. Everything you're saying, as far as when you're faced with truth to a degree where you can't run away from it, lying is not an option. And that's, I'm pulling up here, since we started with the Book of Enoch. I had no clue we were going to talk about the Book of Enoch tonight. So you actually made my night.
Good.
But it's a very interesting thing here, because let me find this passage real quick. It talks about the kings of the earth, when they have to face the Son of Man, which is the Messiah, when he returns, and they have to be judged.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find this quick passage for you.
Sorry. While you're doing that, I want to mention to people, because of that, and I actually, when I got into the whole enclosed world flat earth theory, when I realized what this place was and when it was built, my morality changed to where I will never do anything malicious to anyone ever again. Gun to my head won't do it, because now I know what the cost of that is.
Yeah.
And beforehand, look, I used to do an occasional bad thing, but maliciously, I don't care if someone said, hey, I will never do anything in mean spirit to someone. Now, accidentally, that's one thing, but I won't deliberately do it anymore. It's because
what you're describing is called repentance, by the way. and it's actually a cool thing, because the creator says, I can't remember exactly what passage this is, but he says, the eyes of the Lord roam the earth, seeking whom he may bless, should he find someone that's doing what's right. So I gave you the modern English translation, but that's essentially what it says. Enoch 62, you were talking about people that won't be able to lie anymore. Right. Enoch 62, verse 3, and there shall stand up in that day all the kings and the mighty and the exalted and those who hold the earth, and they shall see and recognize how he, that's the Messiah, sits on the throne of his glory, and in righteousness is a judge before them, and no lying word is spoken before him. Yeah. So this is what we see in Matthew 25 as well, is where he sits on his throne in the New Jerusalem, and all nations are brought before him to be judged. So this is why it's called Judgment Day. It's not T2, obviously. It's not fire and death. It's actually good. It's actually the Messiah is removing the wicked and the people that are murderous,
right,
and that want to kill you with fire and death, with H bombs. if you even believe in those. But they want to remove those people, and he wants to install good people who do what's right. And this is what's called the sheep and goats judgment. The sheep are allowed to live because he sees their heart. They want to do what's right. He just needs to teach them how to actually do that properly. And so this is why, doomsday is only doom for wicked people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the encouraged message we want to leave with you guys. Right. Although we talked about lots of conspiracies tonight, and lots of things that are not conspiracies because they can and are being proven actively every day.
There you go.
So just keep that in mind, and we don't know what the future is going to hold as far as where this conversation internationally is even going to go, and how they're going to try to stop it in the future. But they have been trying to stop it, but if they can't, it's still growing. People are still talking about it relentlessly. Because it forces you to realize you were created. Atheism is a lie. Evolution is a lie. You do have a creator that loves you and cares about you. And that is hopefully the takeaway. If you're watching this and it's your first time at Kingdom of Context, we highly encourage you to seek out the scriptures and put your faith in the creator. Wonderful. So Mark, you're awesome, brother. I really appreciate you coming on. I've met you in person. I don't care what they say about you.
Yeah, I know.
Look, until you show me something differently, I'm only going to believe the best about you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's the way we should all be, in my opinion. So, yeah, brother, I really appreciate you. And in the future, hey, their lighthouse is live, and they're working out some kinks, and it's growing every day. And so, if you haven't taken a look at it, go to take a look at it.
Okay,
so
I will.
It's awesome. Guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for the super chats. Looks like someone dropped a flamethrower. Nice. Thank you so much for that, Aaron. I really appreciate that. And thank you, Andrew, for the super chat, and or for the light sticker, I should say. And we'll be announcing this winner of this gift card tomorrow. So happy Father's Day to everyone out there. And Mark, we'll see you again. Is there anything else to say before you go? Any events or things you want to talk about?
Just real quick, anyone's been listening, take whatever I say with a grain of salt. I'm not here to convince you or persuade you. In the end, you have to do your own research. Always ask questions, figure it out for yourself, and eventually you will get to the truth.
There it is. Have a good night, everybody. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time.